have only slipped away into the next room. I am me, and you are you. Whatever we were to each other, that we still are. Call me by my old familiar name. Speak to me in the easy way you always used to. Put no difference in your tone. Wear no forced air of solemn or sorrow. Laugh as we have always laughed at the little jokes we enjoyed together. Pray. Smile. Think of me. Pray for me. Let my name be ever the household word it always was. Let it be spoken without effort, without a trace of shadow in it. Life means all that it has ever meant. It is the same as it ever was. There is unbroken continuity. So why should I be out of mind because I am out of sight? I am waiting for you, somewhere very near, just around the corner.
Well, on behalf of the Pitts family, Margaret, Becky, Greg, the entire family, we'd like to say thanks to each of you for joining us today to remember one, that we celebrate his life and the way that he lived. We celebrate his faith. I knew Joe just for a short time when he was part of the church that I was helping to pastor, and I always knew him as a man who was full of life and filled with honor, love, loyalty, devotion, service to others, laughter, leadership, and faith. So thank you all for being here today. It was on December 21st, 2020, at the age of 93, that Joe Holliday Pitts went to heaven, and he's now with his daughter, Holly Leah, and his parents, Frederick Baxter and Pearl Lewis Pitts, his sister Ruby Peters, niece Barbara Peters Hobbs, and his brothers Jack Pitts and Bill Hansford. Joe was born November 14th, 1927 in Oklahoma City. He attended Classen High School, where he excelled scholastically and in baseball and basketball. And upon graduating from high school in 1945, he was offered a scholarship to play either to play baseball or basketball at Oklahoma A&M. Somebody's already noted an orange tie today, so hard for me as a Baylor guy to wear orange, believe me. But Joe chose basketball so that he could play under the legendary coach, Henry Iba. And in his freshman year, he was a guard on that 1946 NCAA National Championship team. His education, though, was interrupted, and he was called to military duty in the Army, and he went to Seoul, Korea, to serve as an MP during the occupation period after World War II. And then he returned back to Oklahoma State in 1948, and he continued playing basketball while earning his degree in mechanical engineering in 1951. I cannot imagine that, getting a mechanical engineer degree and playing basketball. And then also completing the ROTC program. That's just amazing. He received his first lieutenant commission. And during his senior year, hear this, he completed 23 hours his first semester and 22 hours his second semester with a GPA of 3.45. And it doesn't take a financial planner like me to add those numbers up. 45 hours in just 2 semesters. That's pretty incredible and just speaks so well of Joe. And on top of that, he was then a member of the Honorary Society, Phi Kappa Phi. So pretty incredible. Well, the Korean War began in 1951, and Joe was recalled to active duty, and he was promoted to second lieutenant and became a company commander in the Army Signal Corps. And upon discharge in 1953, he began his working career at Dow Chemical Company down in Freeport, Texas, as a production engineer, and this began his illustrious 22-year career in the production of magnesium metal. He then became a plant manager of Standard Magnesium here in Tulsa, and he built and managed the extrusion plant, which made anodes and other extruded products, receiving 2 patents during this period. I never knew this about Joe, and we spent time together, which just says this was a guy who was a humble man. And you don't meet many folks like that who have all these accolades. But Joe felt that this was the most rewarding engineering work of his career. Kaiser Aluminum Company purchased Standard, and Joe became the general manager of Kaiser Magnesium Division. Next, as president, he managed the design and construction of the American Magnesium Company in Snyder, Texas, to produce magnesium metal and chlorine from brine wells in West Texas. During this time, he made trips to Europe and Russia as he served a term as the president of the International Magnesium Association. Joe began his second career of 27 years as president of Poe and Associates, which is a consultant engineering company headquartered in Oklahoma City. This company had branch offices in McAllister, Lawton, Oklahoma City, and Tulsa. They also had offices in Wichita and Topeka, Kansas, and Dallas, Texas. And with Joe's superior management skills, along with excellent managers, engineers, and technicians, Poe and Associates became the leading civil engineering consulting firm in Oklahoma. And it was from Poe and Associates that Joe retired in 2002. During his career, Joe was chosen the outstanding engineer in management by the Oklahoma Society of Professional Engineers. He served a term as president of the Consulting Engineer Council of Oklahoma, and was a director in that organization for the following 3 years. In 1998, he was elected a fellow in the American Consulting Engineers Council. Joe enjoyed serving on the Oklahoma Central Credit Union Board for many years, and he became a construction arbitrator in 1999 and decided cases of varying sizes in Oklahoma, Arkansas, and Texas until 2014. Joe also didn't give up his athletic prowess. He began playing tennis when he was 45 years old and only stopped at the age of 80 because of an injury to his spine. He enjoyed the competition of tennis and won many singles, mixed doubles, and men's doubles tournaments. Joe and his partner Dick Land won many tournaments together, notably the 2004 USTA National Men's 75 Indoor Doubles Championship, receiving the coveted Gold Ball Trophy. They also won gold medals at the National Senior Olympics in 2007, and then Joe was inducted into the Oklahoma Tennis Hall of Fame in 2008. In Joe's last text message, he expressed his love for his family, who included his wife, Margaret, Mary Margaret, I understand, of 70 years. That's incredible, Margaret. His daughter, Becky, and her husband, Greg Tuck, granddaughter, Chrissy Tuck, grandson, Crosby, and his wife, Lauren Tuck. And great-grandson, Nate Holliday. You heard that name earlier in Joe's name, Holliday. Cole Ray, and Rowan Hall Tuck. I thought it was interesting in the obituary, and I thought this was really a sweet comment, that the family asked that instead of flowers, that you would remember Joe by doing something kind for someone else. And I would say because that's what Joe would have wanted, and that was also as Joe lived his life, doing things for other people. What a good man. That's the guy I remember, always with a smile, always with eyes of hope and energy and looking forward, not looking backward. So again, thank you all for joining us today. Let's pray. Well, Father, we are grateful that you have allowed us to be able to make a journey with one like Joe Pitts. He was a man of grace, generosity, goodness, man of faith, servanthood, love, loyalty. He represented the very best of you. And so we give gratitude for his life that was so well lived. So now, God, we ask your presence as we remember his life and as we celebrate it. Also, as we pause in moments of sadness because of the loss of all that he meant to us and all that he had done for so many. So grace us now with your presence, and it's in your name. Amen. Joe was part of the military, and we now will have that part of the service.
the acting President of the United States Army, British Nation. Please accept this flag as a symbol of our appreciation for your love and honor.
I was surprised when I received a call from your patient and loving bride telling me that you finally decided to join the ranks of the Ancient Order of the Aged, Wise, and Wistful. Congratulations. Barbara and I wish you peace and good health for 1,000 years. 57 years ago, you and I were among the chosen. As young men, we were anxious to conquer the world. We had the good fortune to fall under the guidance of a man who probably kept us out of a great deal of trouble and heartbreak. In the process, we learned some valuable lessons about how to have a great life and be able to look back and feel good about having made the journey. The lesson is so simple that most folks miss it. Our coach and mentor pointed out that it is a sin not to extend yourself to the limit of the abilities that God gave you. It was accepted that one may have to work one's tail off to perfect your talent, but that was really the part of the game that's called living. What we felt as a college basketball team was that every teammate operated under that philosophy, and as a result, there was never a need for criticism or doubt as to the outcome of our effort. All we had to do was personally live up to the standard, and I think we did. That was the real success that we enjoyed. The same idea was a pretty good guide in all the years as they raced by. I strongly suspect that in all the time that followed, Mr. Joe Pitts never forgot the lesson. Your blessings today you have earned. The love of your friends you deserve. The peace of the future is your reward. Barbara and I wish you and yours Godspeed.
My name is Mike Thompson, and I first met Joe Pitts, it must have been about 1973. We were having one of our Poe company meetings, and Bob Poe said that he was going to have to be gone for a while, and he talked this Joe Pitts into coming to work for us, and Joe was really going to help us out. He said that Joe had majored in basketball at Oklahoma A&M, and that Joe knew everything that anyone knew about how you make magnesium. Well, Joe started talking, and his first words were that he was concerned about our accrual earnings, our aging accounts receivable report, our current and our non-current backlog, and our ratio of net fees to direct salaries. This was a 2-day meeting that we were having, so after we struggled through this first day, there's a guy named Bill Snyder that was our Oklahoma City office manager. So Bill Snyder and I went and started our meeting at the nearest saloon, and I asked Snyder, I said, what's this accrual and other stuff that this Joe Pitts was talking about? Snyder said he didn't have the slightest idea, but he thought that we ought to go find Joe Pitts and feed Joe a little whiskey and explain to him how we really ran the engineering business. So we found Joe in his motel room, and Joe already had his pajamas on, and he was sitting there on the bed reading some financial reports. And he said that he didn't care to have a drink, and he really didn't act very interested in me and Snyder's philosophy on, and it was kind of a tipsy philosophy on engineering management. So after just a short meeting with Joe, Snyder and I decided that we should retire back to the bar. And when we got back, I asked Snyder, I said, what do you think of this Joe Pitts guy? And Snyder said, I don't think that we've got a thing to worry about. He said, this guy's not going to last long in our business anyway, because he doesn't drink nearly enough, and the only guys that we know that wear pajamas are architects. We Poe people out in the branch offices have always had a saying, and that saying is that whenever the going gets tough, everybody leaves. Well, that's a saying that doesn't apply to Joe Pitts, because the tougher it gets, the better Joe Pitts likes it. Joe's a coach, and a mentor, and whenever the stuff really gets deep and sticky, that's when Joe's there to help you get out of it.
My dictionary says that a hero is a man of distinguished courage or ability, admired for his brave deeds or noble qualities. A person who, in the opinion of others, has the heroic qualities or has performed a heroic act and is regarded as a model or ideal. We are here tonight to celebrate just such a man. Joe Pitts is an example of every one of those attributes. Joe has been a hero in many aspects of his life, and I know others of his admirers will be speaking to some of his many accomplishments, but I want to tell you about what a great scholar and athlete Joe was. Back in his Oklahoma A&M days, he was one of the rare individuals who was offered both athletic and academic scholarships. He was offered scholarships in both baseball and basketball, and he chose basketball. Back in those days, athletes really had to work. Like today's athletes, they had to study hard and meet a demanding travel schedule. But in Joe's day, the athletes also had to clean the field house and football stadium along with their practice, games, travel, and studies. Of course, Joe did a lot better than just passing his classes. Joe was on the Dean's Distinguished Students list every semester. He was the outstanding mechanical engineering student his junior year. He was a member of the honorary math fraternity, Pi Nu Epsilon, as well as the honorary mechanical engineering fraternity, Pi Tau Sigma, and the honorary fraternity representing the top 10% of all graduating students, Phi Kappa Phi. I mean, this man did it all. Since the Korean War was on, and Joe did not want to go back into the Army as a private, he joined the ROTC in his senior year. That same year, folks, he competed 45 hours university coursework. Unbelievable. After graduation, he was recalled into the Army as a second lieutenant. Joe went on to have a truly admirable career as an engineer and was intimately involved in developing a new procedure for the manufacture of magnesium. He and his good friend Bob Poe have worked together, and Joe has had the opportunity to use his talents in construction, highway development, and many other areas. We at the Zinc Ranch will be forever appreciative of the expert testimony Joe gave in a federal court case. Joe's strong and informed testimony resulted in a ruling to keep the huge oil trucks off the ranch roads and made the Zinc Ranch a safer place for the thousands of youngsters who visit our 4 scout camps each year. I had always admired Joe, but that is when he became a true hero to me. I will always be grateful to him for his help.
We're now going to hear from a few folks. First of all, Linda Griffith is going to come and read a poem that Joe liked.
Good afternoon. I'm Linda Pitts Griffiths. Joe was my greatly loved uncle, and he will be missed by all of us. in his honor this poem. I have only slipped away into the next room. I am me, and you are you. Whatever we were to each other, that we still are. Call me by my old familiar name. Speak to me in the easy way you always used to. Put no difference in your tone. Wear no forced air of solemn or sorrow. Laugh as we have always laughed at the little jokes we enjoyed together. Pray, smile, think of me, pray for me. Let my name be ever the household word it always was. Let it be spoken without effort, without a trace of shadow in it. Life means all that it has ever meant. It is the same as it ever was. There is unbroken continuity. So why should I be out of mind because I am out of sight? I am waiting for you, somewhere very near, just around the corner.
You're so welcome.
Thank you, Linda. And then Dick Land was one of Joe's tennis partners. They were really successful, so Dick is coming forward to share a few thoughts.
Joe and I started playing tennis when we were about 73, 74, and he saved his best for me because he's a multi-talented man. And I had the pleasure of playing 7 years with him against the big boys in the tennis league, not league, but tournaments. And it wasn't the Olympic rank tennis. It was a much higher level. Some of the guys I played against had their own club were professionals. They've been marvelous in college and after. And we got a gold ball starting off in 2004, and that's just part of the story. To get there, we had to beat a man that was an icon in tennis, had 80 gold balls in national tournaments and international tournaments. And main thing is, we persevered and got a gold ball after we played them in the semifinals to win the finals in that 2004 gold ball. And then we went on and played up until '07. And that was the year that we got ranked second in the nation in men's doubles. And I've enjoyed Joe all this time, knowing that we were together. My memory's not what it used to be, but I don't remember a time that we had an argument. And that just blows my mind when you look at your life and say that about anybody. But he was kind, and when we played tennis, we played to win. And I'm just thankful that I had him during that time. Like I've told many others, I'm a late bloomer, and so was Joe. And I appreciate all the good times we had chasing all those balls down. But I'll stop. I know I'm only supposed to have 2 minutes. I probably won't talk too long. But Joe and I got along so well and enjoyed each other. And I know in 1 year, my last year, went 15,000 balls to tournaments. And so we put out a lot of energy, some money, but good fellowship. And I'll sure miss Joe. Thank you.
Thank you, Dick. And then we heard that Joe managed Poe and Associates for over 2 decades, and probably pretty rare that you would have one who served alongside of you as your secretary come and speak. But we got to hear from Sherry Smith. She probably knew Joe really, really well. So Sherry. You'll be able to give us some good insights to Joe, I am sure. So thank you.
2 minutes?
You got this. It's your pulpit.
Oh, gosh. I don't know if I can keep it to 2 minutes. Margaret. Joe was, that period of my life was probably the best period of my life ever, thanks to Margaret, because I was going through a rough time then, and she had a temporary employment agency, and I don't even know how I got hooked up with you. But I did, and at the time, Joe's secretary was on a leave of absence or something, and they weren't sure if she was going to come back, and so she said, he needs a secretary while she's gone. Go, Sherry. And I go, oh. I had a 2-year-old at the time. And so I went, and the secretary never came back, so that was a blessing. Because I needed a job. And I stayed. And he was so kind to me, because it was a really rough time. I was going through a divorce, and I had a 2-year-old, and so I needed to get a job to take care of us. And sometimes I would come to work, and I was in the bathroom for like 5 minutes just getting the mascara off because I bawled all the way to work because my 2-year-old was hanging on my leg as I left her at preschool. So I'd get all dolled up before I'd, get in there. And he was so kind and so patient and so understanding. So that was good. And then that's where I met Bob, my husband. That was another very blessed thing that happened to me in my life. And he wasn't too crazy about it at first because we weren't supposed to be dating each other because we were both working for Poe. So he kind of overlooked that. And then we got married, and then he said, you're just taking my secretary away, because then I got pregnant and had Brian. Bob stayed, I left. And then after Ryan grew up and went off to college, and I was suffering a severe empty nest syndrome, he called me back and said, Sherry, I think we have a place for you here. I think you can do this, 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 and this. And I go, oh, Joe, really? So I went back to work for him then, and that was another rough place in my life because my father had kind of left the family, and we learned a lot of crazy things about him. So when I was talking to Margaret, when she said, Sherry, could you say a few things about Joe? And I paused for a minute, and I go, oh, gosh, Margaret, I don't know if I can get through it without crying. And I could say a lot of words about Joe because he meant so much to me. It was just really like only 5 or 6 years that I worked as his secretary. But when I was talking to Margaret, and she chuckled when I said this, I said, Margaret, he was my boss daddy. He was my boss daddy. He wasn't a boss to me. He was like a father to me because he walked with me through so many difficult times in my life, and he was so understanding and compassionate. And then when Dick was talking about, he was a great tennis player, okay? But he played some tennis with me, and I was not good at all. And he was just, you got to do this, you got to do this. We played some doubles matches, and he took my place most of the time. He was all over the court. But I mean, I was just like a beginner, and he was so good. And so he didn't put levels on where you were because he was that kind of a man. He was that kind of a man. So, well, I've been thinking about this, well, ever since he went to heaven, about words that describe Joe to me. And then I had a few more when you all were talking. So I'm going to just go through those now and kind of stop. And I've heard these words, and so I know they're not just my words. They're words that you all have expressed because that's how he appeared to all of us. He was respectful and respected. He had a tremendous amount of integrity. He was compassionate and passionate. Very understanding, very athletic. He was kind. He was intelligent. He had a tremendous amount of diplomacy. He cared. He had high moral standards. He was humble. He was tenacious. He was energetic. He was positive. And he was a role model for me. He took the place of my daddy. So I'm just looking forward to the day when we all get to be together up there, celebrate life that God has given us, and especially just fellowship with each other. So you guys, your family, he was treasure. It's a real treasure. That's all.
Thank you, Sherry. Good words. Then we hear from Larry Pitts, and Larry was Joe's nephew.
My father was Jack Pitts, Joe's older brother. The brothers were very close. And even though my father was 5 years older than Joe, when my dad went somewhere, he often took Joe with him. So if my dad went to a pickup baseball game when he was a kid, Joe went along and played with the bigger kids. And when they were chose teams, Joe was probably not among the first chosen. But he was an exceptional athlete, and he wasn't afraid to mix it up with the older boys. Of course, later, little Joe became an all-state baseball player and basketball player in college. The boys and their sister Ruby grew up in a family of love and had a father who held them accountable for their actions and taught them to be honest, conscientious, and reliable. Both boys spoke with reverence and utmost respect when they discussed their father. Their dad taught them to be quail hunters when they were very young. And by the time he was 6, Joe had been taught how to handle a shotgun, how to shoot a shotgun, when not to shoot one, and how to go through a barbed wire fence with a shotgun. During quail season, the boys were allowed to skip one day of school a week, provided they were up on their studies. Both boys became really exceptional quail hunters. Joe was about 6 when his dad bought him a small pump-action shotgun. And in short time, Joe was proficient at shooting and pumping that gun, ready for his second shot. One day when he was 7 years old, or about 7, the boys were hunting with their dad, and the dogs pointed, indicated that there was a bird in the grass nearby. So Dad told Joe, "Okay, Joe, this one is all yours. Walk toward the bird and it'll take flight. Now, he's probably going to fly toward the woods over there, so you're going to have to be pretty quick to get a shot off." So 7-year-old Joe walked up to the bird step by step, and sure enough, the bird jumped up and took off toward the woods. Joe shouldered his shotgun, aimed, fired, pumped it, aimed, fired again, pumped it, aimed, and fired a third time. And my dad said that bird took 3 hops as Joe hit it each time. The bird never made it to the woods. Their dad often took the boys to watch the Oklahoma City Indians play baseball. But to go to the game in the summertime, the boys had to have their chores done. And one of the chores that they jointly were responsible for was mowing the grass. And the day before power mowers, mowing the grass could be quite a chore for kids. So one day, after they had let the grass grow a little too long, the boys struggled to even move the mower. So their solution was to tie a rope from the mower to around Joe's waist. And Joe pulled and Jack pushed. Joe admitted he didn't know how much he helped, but they eventually got the lawn mowed. That's always been one of my favorite mental images of one boy pulling and one boy pushing that lawnmower. When he was president of Poe and Associates, Joe learned of a major project being planned in the Oklahoma City area. And this was a job they thought they were well suited for, so they went to talk to the man in charge for this. And Joe was telling them about the capabilities of Poe and their experiences, what they'd done, and he said the guy just wasn't paying attention. The guy just wasn't listening. And Joe was frustrated by this and kept explaining how the company could help him out. And finally, the guy raised his hand, stopped Joe in mid-sentence. He leaned forward and he said, "You're little Jody Pitts." And Joe admitted, yes, I was that little kid that came, tagged along with my dad to play baseball. Joe became exactly the man that his dad taught him to be: honest, conscientious, and reliable. He was a superb athlete. He was always up on his studies and turned to be very successful in business, and above all, caring and loving father and grandfather and great-grandfather.
To the garden alone, while the dew is still on the roses, and the voice I hear falling on my ear, the Son of God discloses. He speaks, and the sound of his voice
You guys know all of his many accomplishments by now, and what an incredible just person he was, really, in every aspect of his life. What I want to really talk about is his relationship with his family, and at least try to. Do my best to get through it. First got to see the way he loved my grandma. My whole life, getting to see his love for her and the way that was truly lived out was such a great lesson for me, my own life, my own marriage. It was really special, just as a little kid, to get to learn how important that was. To get to see the way he loved his daughters, and how genuine he was in that, and whatever they were doing, whatever interest they had. To see the way he supported them, no matter what. I remember each Christmas we were over there in Tulsa. We didn't live in Tulsa. My Aunt Holly did. We'd wake up Christmas morning, and so we would be there. She wouldn't be there yet. And I remember every time when she would get there, just how happy, how excited he was when she would get there as well. Just as a little kid, I don't know why that stood out to me, but when I was thinking through this, that was a thing that really stood out to me. And I remember thinking that didn't always make sense to me. She lived in Tulsa; they saw each other all the time, but she would come over, and I could tell when she walked in, and that stood out. I think, looking back on it now, his whole family was there together, and once she got there, that made his whole family there, and I think one thing that's always been consistent through his life is, no matter really what was going on, when his family was there, they got all his attention. And he knew he was going to do whatever he could for anyone that was there in his family. I got to see the way he loved his son-in-law, the way he truly became, his own son. I have different friends hear different stories. That's not always the case, It's not always the case for that to happen, and it wasn't just in name, wasn't just something that sounded good. He really was. He truly became his own son. Got to see the way he loved Chrissy and myself. Same thing, the interest he took in our lives, whatever that may be. Sometimes that was things I knew he was also interested in. Sometimes I knew it was things that he wouldn't have necessarily been interested in if it wasn't for the fact that it was us that was doing it. He didn't just take an interest, though. He was fully committed. He was fully bought in. He fully wanted to know every single thing about it. And if there was any way he could help, he wanted to find a way to help with that. And like I said, that was whether it was something he was interested in or not. He became interested in it because we were. I got to see how he embraced my wife, Lauren, when she came into our family. And the same way about my dad and his son-in-law, she really became one of his grandkids. Same for my grandmother. I know that to both of them, she's one of their grandkids the same way that we are. And it means a lot. It means a lot when you can see that and be a part of it. Got to see how he would interact with my kids, my 3 boys. One of my favorite memories that I'll get to have and to cherish for a long time was 1 week before he died. We were over there at their house. 3 boys were over there playing, and Cole and Rowan. Cole's 4, Rowan's 1. He was just showing him attention, and he got down there as close as he can with him. I knew if he could lay down on the floor and play with him, if he had physically been able to do that, I know he would have been. But he was down, sitting in a chair, leaned over, just talking with him, just listening to my 4-year-old who's going to just ramble about anything possible, but he just wants someone to listen, someone to say something back, and that's what he was doing. Cole was over there for a long time with him. One time, climbed up in his lap. Rowan, who's 1, had these little wooden blocks, and Grandpa was throwing him in the trash can, and making a noise. Rowan was laughing over and over and over. Anything that makes noise seems to be what Rowan's passionate about, and it kept him engaged. And again, it was just an example. At any age, that's what Paw Pitts wanted to do, was to find what that person was interested in and to share in that with them. And that's what he was doing, even with someone as young as his great-grandkid, who was 1 year old, even a week before his passing. And you could just see, no matter what he was going through, no matter what was going on, when family was there, that was going to be a special moment, and he was going to give them everything that he had in that moment. Excuse me. I learned more from him, just getting to see that love that he had from his family. As you've heard through that video, through some of the people that have spoke, he was going to be someone that was not about making excuses. He was going to be someone that was about toughness. Like I say, I learned that from him, doing a really terrible job of showing that right now. But I do think that those are 2 things I was really able to learn from him. Not by just the way he talked, not just by a lesson or something that he would say or a story he would share, but the way he lived his life all the time. Whether that was his work life and his career, whether that was his athletic life, whether that was his personal life, whether that was something with his family. You knew he was going to do everything he could, not find an excuse. I don't know if I was a lot younger when I first heard this story. We haven't even recently talked about it. It's just something that stayed with me forever. So I hope I'm saying it at least close to how it happened. But in his tennis career, I got to hear his partner just talk right now, which was phenomenal. I remember one time he hurt his right shoulder. He was right-handed, hurt his right shoulder. Wasn't going to be able to play in the qualifier to get to the Senior Olympics. Doc told him wasn't going to be able to play. He might be able by the time the Senior Olympics got there, but he wasn't going to be able to qualify for it that year. It's not really even an excuse. That's a real reason to not do it. But because he was the kind of person he was, he figured out a way to play left-handed enough to at least qualify to get there, and he did that, and they were able to accomplish that. I'm sure his partner probably had to pick up a little more of the slack during that time, but he was still able to find a way to get out there and to accomplish that task, to get that job done, so to speak, that was before him. I had several other stories there, but I'm just going to tell one more. Even when he was in his 90s, and he was still struggling with that spine injury that he had 10 years earlier. He was still finding a way to try to rehab, try to ride his stationary bike every day, trying to keep his legs active, walking around the neighborhood, dragging his walker, dragging it behind him, trying to get as far as he could with his legs, train up as much strength as he could with them before he had to use it. I just feel like these aren't normal traits. That's not the way everyone does things. Society's filled with a way to make an excuse. I work in a public school, work with kids all the time. Everyone is looking for an excuse to get out of something all the time. That's what's natural. I just feel so blessed to have gotten to learn from Paul Pitts that isn't the right way to do it. And it's not just excuses or something that's small. I mean, those are things that he shouldn't have been doing. He shouldn't have been able to go play and qualify when his right shoulder is torn up playing tennis in his 70s. He shouldn't have been able to, 10 years after a spine injury, into his 90s, continuing to try to do everything he could to rehab, just because that's the way he learned to do it. Don't find an excuse. And like I said, those were moments that it would have been very easy to find an excuse. I mean, those would have been things nobody would have questioned if he had given up on those. No one would have questioned those things. It's not the way he was built. It's not his character. It's not the way he was ever going to do things. He was different. He was special. The way he lived was just an example to me, and it will always be an example to me. It's an example that I'll do everything I can to pass down to my own kids, to continue his legacy affecting his family forever. And that's what I think is so important and so impressive about the way my grandpa lived. And I know this day is about my grandpa Pitts. I also want to acknowledge my grandmother. Her strength, her attitude, just who she is as a person. Not only does it never stop amazing me, I've always been proud. I've always loved her tremendously. But the older I get, the more amazed I am at her own life and the strong, not just the strong woman that she is, but the strong person that she is. It's been amazing to see her even go through, this loss. Married as long as they've been, basically her whole life, and to see her strength, see the way she handles things, to see the way she still talks to her family and her grandkids and her great grandkids, to make as much time for them as possible still, is so amazing to me. That way of living, that lifestyle of both my grandpa and my grandmother, I feel like made my mom who she was. Tough, determined, selfless, giving, smart. She's going to do anything she can for her family as well. And all of that, I feel like, started with him and is something that needs to be attributed to him, something I'm so grateful for in the life that he lived. I miss him. I hate that I can't have another conversation with him. I hate that my kids don't get to know him a little bit longer. But the impact that he's had on our family, I think will be alive for generations to come with how it'll be passed down. Loved him very much. I'm so thankful for him. Thank you.
Thank you, Crosby. I know you'll miss your granddad, and he was really one of the fine men that I knew. And I'm going to shorten my comments. We've had some really good words, but I wanted to take a minute to just invite you. We've heard some one-word comments from people. If you were thinking about Joe and you could say, identify him with one word, what would that be? I'm just going to let you voice those out if you'd like to. One word to describe Joe Pitts.
Dependable.
Patient. Funny.
Wise.
Law. Available. Tenacious.
Good words. Good words. I don't think Joe would want us to use this word, but it's a word that I think God would want us to all use for ourselves. And for me, that word is saint. Most of us think the word saint just talks about holiness or purity or doing right things. But when I think about saints, I think about people who are selfless, who are giving, generous, compassionate, passionate people. Folks like we heard Sherry describe Joe. And I think of Joe as a saint. The psalmist wrote in 116, he wrote, "Precious in the sight of the Lord is the passing of his saints." I always was curious about that scripture. Precious in the sight of the Lord is the passing or the death of his saints. As I've gotten older and as my kids have moved out of the house, one lives in North Carolina, the other in Africa, I only get to see them once or twice a year, which is not nearly enough. But I think I started to understand what this preciousness is that is spoken of about the Lord when people pass. But you know, it's kind of when your kids come and you know they've been gone a while and they come and they stay with you just a short time, and you wish they could stay with you longer. You cherish those moments, and you look forward to the time that you'll be able to spend longer times with them. And I was thinking that's what God must feel at times, that he's watched over us. I think in the case of Joe, God was the spectator, and Joe was the contestant or the athlete or the performer. And God has been cheering him on, watching with great joy. And now one that he called his own, who was part of his team, is in his presence. And God looked forward to that. And I think it speaks of God's tenderheartedness for those of us who are left behind, Margaret. You know, that God cares about us too, and would hope that we will find comfort in his presence and knowledge, knowing that God is with us. I do love the Psalm 23, and I like the way he ends it, where he says, "Yea, though I walk through the valley of the valley of the shadow of death, I'll fear no evil, for thou art with me. Your rod and thy staff, they comfort me." And, you know, shadows don't happen except for the fact that there's light shining. And so when we walk through these valleys of shadows, of whatever they might be, let's take hope and courage in knowing that the light that shines forth is always present and shines with us, and that's God and his Son, Jesus Christ. A few verses that came to mind when I thought about Joe. The first one that came to mind was Paul's words as he reflected and wrote to the young Timothy. And he wrote, as he reflected on this life that was probably coming to an end, he said, "I have fought the good fight. I have finished the course. I have kept the faith. Henceforth there is laid up for me a crown of righteousness, which the Lord, the righteous judge, shall give me at that day. And not only to me, but to all them also that love his appearing." And I just thought that was so fitting for Joe. We recognized he served our country. We heard from one of his associates. Joe was a fighter. He loved great challenges, and when the tough got going, what people do? They leave, except for Joe. Joe loved challenges, and he loved being a problem solver. I think y'all talked about that. He was always looking to make life easier, not necessarily for himself, but for others. And that was the selfless spirit that he knew. And we've heard how he, even to the very end, even at 90, I could see Joe dragging that walker. He was a fighter, and he wanted to finish that race. We saw the picture of him there running the race, and Joe knew how to take one step forward at a time to complete the journey, and he finally completed it. And so we can learn from him about how to live life, not for self, but for others, for a God that he obviously took to heart. Joe was part of that great generation that we know, people who were born in the 20s and the 30s and served our country. That was a generation, that I don't think did a lot of talking. They didn't do a lot of talking about their faith. I think he was kind of a James man, and what I'm saying there is that James would say, you talk about your faith, well, I'll show you my faith by my good works. And I think that's what Joe did. He lived his faith out for folks to see. And it was just part of who he was. He didn't have to do a lot of talking. You just knew he was one who followed his master and lived it out. He fought the good fight. He finished the course. Then I thought about that ending part, about a crown of righteousness. Joe, I think probably from the time he was young, got ribbons, at least back in my day, in the 60s, you got ribbons when you were winning awards. And I imagine probably Joe, I bet he had a lot of ribbons, but we know he had a lot of medals. He had a lot of trophies, got plaques. But I think that which he aspired toward didn't happen until the day he crossed over into that new life. And he got his crown of righteousness. Matthew 25 ends with a parable. And the Lord talked about how there was a master and he was taking a journey and he decided to leave 3 people in charge. And so he left to one, he left 5 talents. With another, he left 2, and with another 1. And when he returned from that journey, he called forth the one with 5 talents and said, "What have you done?" And the guy said, "I made another 5 talents with this." And he said, "Well done, my good and faithful servant." To the one with 2, he says, "What have you done?" He said, "Look, I've gained 2 more talents with the one." And he says, "Well done, my good and faithful servant." And then the one that he'd entrusted with 1 came forward. And he says, "What have you done?" And that one said, "Well, I knew you to be a hardened master." He said, "I decided I would just go and hide that talent, bury it in the ground." And of course, this made the master furious. And he said, "You could have at least put it in the bank, earned interest on it." And he said, "Take that talent away from it and give it to the one with the 5 that's done so well." And I think what we would hear today, I think what Joe has heard from his master is, "Well done, my good and faithful servant." He lived a life that we could aspire toward, that we can learn from. And I think Joe would say to us all, I hope you'll know the one that I knew, the one who gave me a crown of righteousness finally, the one named Jesus, the one who has said to me, "Well done, my good and faithful servant." Now to all us, let us go and do likewise, so that we too one day may receive the crown of righteousness from the one who gave his life for us, his name being Jesus. Let's pray. Holy Father, you've heard the many good words that have been used to describe Joe Pitts. One that, as we leave, may we call him Saint Joe. May we remember that you call each of us to be your saints, followers of the one who gave his life for us. Father, we pray that now you will comfort these who have suffered loss. But we look to you with hope, knowing that one day we will be together again, as you've promised us. Thank you for making that possible. Thank you for the memories we have of Joe. May we take those now, find comfort, but also find challenge, and go forth and live as he would ask us to, being a servant, being a person of generosity, of grace, of humility, one who sought to use his giftedness and talents and make the very most of them, so that one day he would hear the words, "Well done, my good and faithful servant." Thanks for receiving him. Thanks for looking over us now and walking with us as we leave this place.
Our Father, which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done in earth as it Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts, as we forgive our and lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever.
On behalf of the Pitts family, once again, we want to thank you for joining us as we've been able to celebrate this life of Joe, so well lived. I know your presence means a lot to the family. It's also a testimony of how Joe impacted your lives. And the family would like to invite you to join them for our reception. That'll be just outside. Go to your left this way. I'm going to ask that y'all go ahead, and we're going to let them kind of make their way. I want to remind you, as they make their way, We've now had a first case of the coronavirus here in Tulsa, so be sure if you cough, cough into your sleeves. You might fist bump each other and stuff like that, or wave, but surely greet one another with a smile and a word of affirmation. So again, thank you for being part of the service to remember Joe, and appreciate all your words that y'all have shared about him. So God's blessing to you, and we'll see you over here this direction to the reception.